Yeah. So changing lanes a little bit, Ed. A few leadership development questions I've got for you. I guess I'll start with youth is never going to be a forever thing for any youth leader because you get old
true. Yeah,
and
you
you
do.
grow out of it. But I think it's really easy for us as youth pastors to want to hold tightly onto the youth leaders that we have spent years and years and years sometimes developing, even when their time is up, even when they are called to something new. Can you just encourage us for a bit? How are we able to know when the right time is to release our youth leaders? How are we able to graciously release them? And then how are we also able to know our place as they're stepping into their next season?
Yeah, wow. Those are some very good questions. Cool. All right, let me just answer all of that in a few minutes. No, I think, I think we've got to realize that these youth leaders are not ultimately ours. Like and I think sometimes we do need to realize that we're just playing a part in their journey. And for some people that will be, for the rest of their life that you're discipling them and walking alongside them. But for some people it's a season and then you release them into a new season of ministry. We've probably had that over the last few years. It's been amazing. Like I've seen over this last couple of years, so many young men that I discipled, they're now youth pastors, but not in the same church that I'm a part of. And I think sometimes they're like, cool, okay, like I just want to keep them all and they'll all be my youth pastors forever. But the reality is with the kingdom of God's big and we've got to let some people go and actually say, we're going to let you flourish. And I think I've just realized that Jesus' discipleship, the fruit of it was seen once he released them to go out into the world and make disciples. Jesus spent a lot of time with his disciples, teaching them character, modeling an example, ministering, showing them what the kingdom of God was going to look like. They witnessed all of these things and then they went out. And I think it's actually, we sometimes actually forget to realize that some of the greatest fruit is often seen after we've released someone to go and do it. And so in answer to that first question, when is the right time? I don't know if there's ever a right time, but I do think there are some indicators on, okay, is there a dream in their heart? And is there something they really feel a burden on their heart to do? And then something I will often do is if they stay in this current role that they're in, so let's say, for example, is me as a youth pastor, and then we're not employing someone to be a leader of a few life groups, but that is what that person's role is. But they feel on their heart, man, I want to minister to the next generation. And they're growing into a capacity where they could actually do that. Is me holding on to them right now going to hinder their overall growth and journey?
Great.
And sometimes opportunities will open up if people have multiple campuses in another campus, so you can still work with them, of course. But sometimes it's like, cool, well, they might come to you and say, hey, this youth pastor role is opened up at a church. I really would love to apply for it. If they feel a burden on their heart and they've sought out wise counsel and they're doing it in a healthy way, I'd say go for it. Because I think sometimes we can often hold on to people for too long, and I don't want to be a hindrance to their overall growth. And there will be sometimes that the capacity of the ministry will grow so that we could, have them evolve, but actually be okay to say, you know what, I'm gonna release them, because so I don't think there's ever a right time, but I think there is sometimes an indicator of, man, as part of this person's growth, I've actually got to release them so that they can do that. Sorry, what were the other parts of the question? That was such a good question. I got all caught up in that.
Yeah, how do we know our position after we do release them, and our capacity to continue to lead them?
Nice.
And also how do we release them graciously?
Yeah. No, it's good.
Not be bitter.
Yeah, that's so true, man. There are so many times where I'm like, oh, not another one. Like, please no. Like, can you just stay? But one thing I've got to realize that is if God cares about our ministry and what we do, and what we are building and sowing into the next generation. And I think sometimes in terms of releasing people graciously and not with bitterness, it can be really easy to think, if I release them now, I'm not going to have the right leaders, or there's going to be a gap. Well, He is so faithful to bring in the right people. And I've found the more releasing I've been of people, the more he has brought the right people in.
Yes.
I've released so many leaders and I'm like, jeepers, I don't know how we're going to fill that gap. And then a leader in the ministry has stepped up. Someone's come in and said, man, I felt called to support you guys. God is really faithful.
It's a sowing, reaping principle,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Exactly. It's the principle of sowing and reaping. And you can't actually release a seed until you let it go. The seed won't be sown until it comes out of your hand. And I found the more that I've had a closed hand, then the more that I don't get the right leaders.
Yeah, right.
And the more that I've tried to hold on to these people, the more that I haven't got the people that our ministry needs. Yeah. So number one, I would realize releasing them graciously, well, God will take care of my needs and he will take care of the needs of these young people.
Great.
I've realized that God cares about the young people in my ministry more than I do. And I've always brought myself back to that. God, you actually care about these young people way more than I do because they're your sons and daughters and you want to see them flourish in the life that you have for them. So I'm going to trust that you're going to take care of it. Number two, I would say you want to be able to say that you've done everything you can while they've been under your leadership. So if they're maybe leaving in a bad spirit or there's something that's, I would address it. Hey, look, I've just noticed this. And regardless of how they respond, at least you've done what you can.
Yeah.
You know? I think when things are left unsaid, that's an opportunity for bitterness to be,
Yeah.
a seed of bitterness to be sown. But to say, hey, look, we had these conversations and I've done everything I can. And I know, you know what? In that time that person was under my leadership, I was faithful to do what God had asked me to do in their life. And then in terms of your role in someone's life, I think the amazing thing about youth ministry and even just any next generation ministry, young adults ministry, is that your role in someone's life and your relationship with someone grows and changes, and that's awesome. Some of my best friends now were youth kids in my youth ministry. I love it because I'm like, well, now they're in their 20s, they're married, you know, some of them are having kids. Crazy, some of my youth kids had kids before I had kids. Like, it's weird to think that. Like, I'm like, you are still 12 in my eyes. Like, why do you have a child? But it's amazing because now I'm like, well, at one point, my role in your life was very much leadership focused. Like, I'm not your boy when you're 15 and I'm 24. You know, like there is a level of like, yeah, where one day that friendship will start. But right now, you're looking to me to be your pastor. Mm-hmm. But as that's grown, as they've matured, like I think it's amazing that now friendships have been built with people who were in my youth ministry, but now they're in a different stage of life. And my role now might look like they might still come to me for some things, but I'm not primarily their pastor. So I've even had some guys over the last few years who have moved away, who have gone to other churches, and they'll still come to me for things and I'll give them advice. But then I'll always say, hey, you do need to find someone in your local church that can walk you on this journey because that's healthy and you need someone in your local church to pastor you. I'll always be here to encourage you, to pray with you, to give you advice, but also you need someone. So I think it's knowing like what that looks like if they're in a different season, if they're in a different church. Our campus pastors, they sent my wife Vic a text the other day. And they just said, we're actually just Anna, one of our campus pastors, she said, it's funny because you're 20 years younger than us, but you're some of our greatest friends now. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, right. But we would still look to them for leadership. And so I think these relationships can grow and can change and that's okay. And I think you got to grieve that. Okay, well, man, we had some great times when I was a youth pastor and man, it was amazing. Just like, I'm so thankful when I look back over the years for the amount of kids that I've been able to pray for on the altar at a youth camp and God's moved in their life. Like, I look back on those memories with fondness, not wishing for like the golden days, you know, like don't look back and think, oh, those old days were good and they were the best. Like they were very good, but I'm so grateful I got to be a part of it. And those relationships might have changed now, but I'm so grateful for what that looks like in this season. Yeah. I think that's that old wineskin, new wineskin mindset. Man, it's a new season, so I've got to have a new way of thinking. Yeah. And so learning to be like, I'm appreciative, I'm grateful for the seasons that we've had, and I'm grateful now that the relationship might have changed and my role might have changed, but I would say if it's deepened, that's awesome as well.
Yeah. All right, a big one that I've had to learn over years was that like people aren't leaders in your team. First of all, they're not yours. Mm-hmm. Like they're not tools to get your job done more
true.
effectively. They are people that we are partnering in the
Yep.
mission of God with,
Yep.
that we are just instructing, we're leading the way. But they're partners in this. It's the greatest mission on the world. That's why it can sometimes feel hard when they want to leave you. Like, leave what? Like, we're going to die for this thing. They're like, yes, no, I'm going into different ministry.
Yes.
But they're not tools that are accomplishing our goal. They're people we partner with. So before they are a leader on our team, they are a disciple of Christ. It's a big thing.
Very good.
And I had so many, they're not exit interviews, but in those conversations when they feel like they want to go, I'd just constantly say, I hated the phrase, I want to step out. That would be a trigger for me. I'd just go, hey, we never step out of serving God. We never step out of the kingdom, never step out of mission. I would love you to step into something like narrow.
Yeah, great.
Sure, you might be youth has got a lot going on, but you might be stepping into something a bit more narrow.
Yep.
What are you stepping into?
Great.
Into the creative team, into kids, into some ministry you feel God's called,
great.
into being I'm dropping the ball being a small group leader because I'm involved in all these things. I'm like, great, we'll step further into being an excellent small group leader in this season. You're busy, you're studying, you're poor, you're whatever. Step further into a narrower part that God's calling you into. Because I want, their discipleship is my primary concern, not whether I'm going to hit any goals that I set at the
100%.
start of the term, is ultimately. And I've got so many friends, as you said, from like 12 years ago, 15 years ago, who would still call me in the middle of the night if they've been busted for stuffing up in their relationship. Or this morning, someone I haven't thought of for 17 years just found out he's in another country. And 3 a.m. this morning trying to call me and letting me know he's just been given a life-changing diagnosis.
Wow.
But I remember those times where I was like 10 p.m. at his house praying for him about different things. So like their discipleship is our primary thing. They're not our leaders to accomplish our goal. They are people we partner with, and we want to see them set up for the rest of their life, not just our term plan.
Totally.
That's good. So on the leader front, not just when they leave, but like you've been very effective, and Arise has been very effective at developing exceptional young leaders. How? Like, a minute. Give us. Like, how do we? There's obviously an ecosystem, a greenhouse where this happens, but also there's strategy involved. There's ways that it happen. What can we learn? Like, we might not be able to do everything because of different contexts, different sizes, all sorts of stuff. Well, like, there's not many better in the Australasia area to look at than you guys, particularly in youth ministry. And you're going again, you're doing it more and spreading it around. So, like, how can we learn? How do we develop young leaders better and young solid disciples? Not just they're competent preachers, but they're like really bad Christians. Because you guys have just the track record is very impressive, and I'd love to learn from it.
Yeah, well, I think our senior pastors, our founding pastors, John and Gillian, they modeled that better than anybody I know.
Sure.
And I think when I think about my journey as a leader and then how I've raised up leaders, things I've really noticed is give people a vision they want to be a part of. I heard an interview I think John was sharing, and he talked about when he launched Arise, and he used that phrase, one day we will. Yep. So it was one day we will be a church that does this. And I love, in the book of Proverbs, it says, without prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. Yep. And so people want a God vision that they can be a part of. People want to live for something bigger than themselves. Humans want a sense of purpose. We want to make a difference. Yep. And when you give someone a vision for this is what we believe that God could do in our youth ministry, this is what, and often it will just flow from the top. Like it'll flow through. It'll be partly. It will be a large part of it will be serving the vision of your house. But this is what we really sense God is going to do in our youth ministry this year. There's something really exciting about that, because vision gives people something to come back to when things get hard.
Yeah, cool.
As a leader, when times are tough, or when I'm like, oh man, I'm not seeing the breakthrough, to go back and say, well, this is what we sense that God was saying to us. And I've learned that as being a part of a team. Like, man, our leader, our youth pastor said that this is what they had on their heart, and man, I still get to play a part in that. So even if I'm not seeing it right now, I'm still going to be faithful because, man, I believe that God actually spoke to them, and I believe that there's a vision from God, and we're actually a part of creating that. And then I think, secondly, give someone a part to play in that. Catching up with Mercedes and some of the crew over the weekend, I've been so inspired that you guys give young people a part to play in the vision of your youth ministry, the student leadership things that you guys are doing.
Yeah,
because
he's exceptional as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Well.
You're just feeling great about yourself now. You're like, more compliments, please. I think it's fantastic because people don't just want to, okay, this is a vision, but no, this is the part that you can play in it. So I'd say give someone a part to play, and how that looks is by seeing something in them that they don't yet see in themselves. So I am, to be honest, I'm number one doing what I'm doing today because God called me to do it. But secondarily to that, I was willing to take a step of faith and to actually be like, all right, I'm going to do this because a leader saw something in me. They said, I think you're incredibly pastoral. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. They said, I think you could lead young people really well. All right, okay. Well, I love what God's doing in the next generation, so I'll give it a go. And people want to be called up to a higher level. So if you give people a vision to be a part of, give them a part to play, and then speak something into them that they don't yet see in themselves. So I'd say those things. And then lastly, I'd say get invested in that. Like, don't just be like, here's what you can do, now go and do it. Absolutely. Like some people there are leaders who just thrive on that. But there will be a level of, I am going to help you on this journey. Yeah. I am going to disciple you on this journey. When I give a youth leader a new life group, hey, you're starting this life group, there will be the initial, all right, let's go do it. I'll push you into it. Like, we'll not push you into it. Like, we'll take the plunge type thing. Just take a step. You can do it. Do the first one, and then I will check up. How did that go? Maybe I was there. Man, this is what you did so well. For this time, maybe you could work on this. And as they, I guess, achieve those things, or as they start to step into those things, celebrate those things really well. Man, you led that discussion so well last time. I think next time you could focus on leading a time of prayer. Oh, you did that time? That was amazing. That was so good. Maybe you could work on the communication with parents the next time. Awesome. And then little by little, you can take a step back and kind of take your hand off a little bit and just let them run with it.
Great.
Because then they'll be able to, by speaking into them, this is what I see in you, and then supporting them so that they can step into it, they'll develop a level of self-confidence and God confidence and saying, oh, I can actually do this. But that will come by you not just being like, cool, right, go figure it out for yourself. Actually give them something to grab hold of. And here's how I can take a next step. We had it as a church over many years, a program in our church that we started with our worship team, and then it led into leadership stuff, was Leadership Essentials. And something that was amazing in that team was every leader, be it a worship leader who's been on the team since the beginning of Arise, or someone who's just joined the team, and the same for a youth pastor or a youth leader, is everyone had a next step. So as a youth leader, I would tell a leader, this is what I'm working on. Like I'm working on, for me, I'd be like, well, I'm working on at the moment my finances. I don't know. It's something like that. I'm working on, man, I want to intercede for others. Or man, I really feel like I'm wanting to step out in faith and work on praying for the sick, which is funny because it's like work on things like, but it's these are these things that I feel like God is growing in me. And so when I give them something of, hey, here's something that you could work on, or here's a next step for you, they are not seeing me tell them to do something that I wouldn't do in my own life.
Yeah, great.
And I think you really want to model that. Whatever you're telling someone to do, like you're talking about not just building great preachers, but great leaders, you want to model whatever you're doing. So I'm not telling you to do something that I wouldn't do. The Pharisees got themselves into a lot of trouble because they would tell people, they would put up these impossible standards, and then they wouldn't live lives like that themselves. I want to be someone who follows through with what I say. Yep. So I guess it's a lot that I've said, but I think, give someone a vision they can be a part of. This is what God's calling us to do. Give them a part to play. See something in them that they don't see in themselves and speak that into them. Walk them along that journey so that they can grow. And then as you give them next steps, model it yourself. those are probably some things I'd be thinking about in terms of like raising leaders. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you've done very well at it. So
That's very kind.
great.
Ed, Arise has 11 locations, and they all vary from in sizes, like you said just before. What are some things that you would advise youth pastors, regardless of their size? What are those solid things for growth that don't change, regardless of if size changes?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's great. I think a couple of things. I think number one, we can all spiritually grow our young people.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if you've got 200 or 2. God has entrusted those ones to us to grow them closer to Jesus. And so that will be the number one thing. How are these young people? So often we have a national youth meeting on Zoom or Teams now. Zoom just gives me PTSD from lockdowns.
Come on.
Teams. And we will open with share a testimony about something that God has been doing in some young people's lives in your campus. Because some of our locations have 90, 100 kids, but we want to share a personal story. Same as a location that has 15. They can share a personal story. And it's not about, we won't be asking them. We'll know, okay, how many have been coming to your Friday nights. We don't want to know that when we get to those meetings. Because that'll just make the person in a small location feel a bit stink because they're like, oh, well, I've got 10 and that was great, but this youth ministry at a night of 180 kids, that's awesome, so far to go. But actually be like, no, the primary winners are these young people under your care growing in their walk with God. Yep. So that would be one thing that we would always, I guess, be encouraging them. How are your young people growing spiritually? Because, man, I've led in seasons and I've been to youth ministries that are large, but there's no spiritual health. Because numerical growth alone is not the only measure of health.
Totally.
So I'd be asking how spiritually are young people doing? I would help set goals for their location that are relative to their location. Cool. You want to grow. I mean, always we'll be talking about how are the leaders going under your care? How's your team doing? Okay, cool. Well, help them set faith goals that are relevant. So, in Wellington, we probably need another 20 leaders. But how unfair would that be if I said to one of our smaller locations, hey, you need 20 in the next year? Well, that's going to make them feel like I'm never going to be able to do this. I've got 2 on my team. Yeah. Imagine if you doubled your team, you got 4 by the end of the year. Imagine if that launched another life group, that would give you capacity for. So we just try and break it down as much as we can. So for example, rather than being like, I think we were chatting the other day about that ratio of leaders to young people. Man, if you have, let's say 1 to 7 or 1 to 10, and you got 2 new leaders, or, that would give you capacity for 20 more young people to be pastorally cared for. So it's helping them make that goal of growth or that goal of, an increase of what God's doing or more young people getting saved, not feel like a far off thing.
On that one, though, it's right. How it intrinsically linked have you found that? Of
that leadership
to the extra, you 1 to 7? 1 to 10?
Probably 1 to 10 at the moment, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Great. Same.
I'd love to be 1 to 7, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Yeah. How have you found that link? So we did an offline thing with Josh Bull, and he was like, man, we're at a cap, and once they realized their ratios, he said we added an extra X amount of leaders, and then nearly rapidly we saw the exact ratio come in because that creates room. There's a faith element, that vacuum going on, but also the competency. So
I totally agree. I think there is a very clear correlation to leadership and the amount of leaders that you have to the amount of young people that you reach. Because I think I've just found God cares about his kids. He cares about his sons and daughters. And I think I've just realized man, Jesus, the thing that he didn't pray for a bigger harvest, he prayed for more workers.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we pray for a bigger harvest, but Jesus is wanting us to pray for more workers, because if we have more workers, then we'll have a great harvest. And we've found we had a season of time where we really needed to invest in and grow our team. 2019, 2018, youth was in a real rebuild season when we took it on. And we were we really need to grow our team. So we spent a couple of years investing into our team, raising up some great leaders. we had far more leaders than we did teenagers. So we'd have like 250 to 300 on a Friday night. And we had like, oh gosh, about 70 or 80 leaders. We were we're going to stack this team. And sometimes there were leaders who were like, oh, like, I've just started this life group and there's only 3 kids. And instead of pulling them back in, we'd say, well, that's great. One day you're going to have 10 in that life group. So this is preparing you for harvest. Yep. And we launched heaps of life groups. And at first there was probably a few months where some leaders were like, are you sure? Like, but then post summer camp in 2020, we saw it was a real special move of God. Like our youth ministry grow by like 200 kids in 6 weeks. Like it was wild. Wow. But
yeah, you were ready for that.
We were ready for that.
How good.
And even during that season of 2020 when we were in and out of lockdowns, we never dropped like that whole time. It was probably, to be honest, the grace of God. Like I think, you know, like there have been other seasons where it's been like we've had this growth and then we've dropped. Like I really think it was just God's goodness. But we made sure over that season, especially then in lockdown, that we were investing in our leaders so that they were healthy, that they felt like they were supported, so that they could lead these young people well. And we saw a huge increase in teenagers attending life groups because there was the capacity for them to be pastored and discipled. So I think at the moment we're at youth now, it's been a big journey for us as a church. And so we're in a bit of a rebuild season again with youth. And I've just been saying to our youth pastor, look, right now youth might look like, you know, it might not be as big as it once was, but there is an incredible opportunity for you to raise up a new team to prepare for when God brings the increase again. Yep. And I have always I've had a real realization is that we often pray for revival, but we're not even ready to steward it. Yes. We want God to bring a move of God, bring souls in. He 100% will, but are we ready to steward that?
Yeah, that's great.
And so I think for me, I've been encouraging our current youth pastors, how's your team ready for that? If your youth ministry were to grow by 50 kids, 20 kids, would you be ready for that? And some of them will be like, yep, ready to go. And it's amazing. And we're seeing some growth in those areas. One of our locations she was a voluntary youth pastor and youth grew from like 40 to 100 kids in a year. But it was like because she just got busy investing into the team and saying we're prepared and ready to go. Yeah. And I think there are times where it's like it doesn't always happen. No, you know, it's not like a guaranteed, foolproof tick and that'll work. There's, of course, seasons where things happen differently and it's just like, well, there's just a sudden increase of young people but often there are things that we can do to prepare for it. Yeah. So I would say there is a real correlation between our capacity to, have, I guess, workers in the harvest fields.
Mm-hmm. That's good. A couple of years ago, I remember praying. I was at home. I was praying for the season that we were in. God, what do we need to focus on? I'm getting frustrated. And then I just looked out my window, and this little tree that we have in our front garden split down the trunk. Like as I was looking at it, just half of it fell off. Oh, wow. And just straight down the middle, I just felt God saying, that's what's going to happen in your church. Because you are focused on the leaves, not the trunk. Wow! And like by my grace, so people are going to continue to get saved. You're declaring the gospel and things, but you're not strong enough. You don't have the capacity to hold all that I'm doing, all that I want to do, and so you need to work on the trunk. Yeah, absolutely. And I just was very convicted at that moment. Yeah. 5 minutes later, the guy that coaches me called. I'm like, mate, I'm not in a good state to talk. Process is with you. And he's like, well, let's get working on the trunk. Let's get these leaders into gear. Let's get some good systems going. Because if God is showing you pictures and speaking to you about like the harvest is plentiful, as you were saying, but it's the workers that are few. So we need to pray to God to send more workers. Let's go to the workers. Let's not just ask for new wine, but prepare the new wine skins as well. And so I think that spending time on that's been a big game changer for us. And it's good to hear from you guys as well. Yeah. That's some good areas to focus in on, but it's good. Let me ask another real practical thing, maybe not as deep as what we've talked about up to now. Just what makes a really good Friday night or like whatever night people are having youth on? What do you think are the key elements for you? Okay, you can give advice to everyone if you want, but in your world, for sure. All of your locations, regardless of size, you go, here is what a great Friday night looks like. Big budget, small budget.
Yeah, well, I think what makes a great Friday night, number one, an opportunity for young people to meet with God. And you can do that with an acoustic guitar and a singer or a full band. I think that doesn't matter whether you've got an LED screen or you're in this old dingy school hall. If you're making space for young people to meet with God, then that you don't want them to come and go and being like, man, was that it? Like, because young people are coming, and the thing I've realized, I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent. I'll get back to what I was saying, but if we're trying to give them a good experience or put on a good show, the world can do a better job. They can go to a better concert than what the church can put on. There are some great churches with great production values, but I guarantee you at the heart of those, they wouldn't be saying that their number one goal is to put on a good show. Like, they're saying we want people to meet with Jesus because we can give people something the world can never offer them. Yeah. And that's the presence of God, you know? So how are we creating space for a young person to meet with God? Be it in a Bible study, in a time of prayer, be it in a service in times of worship and ministry and hearing the word of God preached. So I'll always say there'll be an opportunity for a young person to encounter God and to give their lives to Jesus. Right. I think secondarily, hearing the word of God, be it in a small group study, be it in a message on a Friday night. I think having an element of fun doesn't have to be a slick production game, but young people just want to be like, man, I think sometimes we actually just forget that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And young people just want to have of course you want to have these moments of significant encounters with the presence of God, but have a bit of fun as well. We don't need to be super intense all the time. Yeah, so I would say have some moments of just fun. It doesn't need to be a giveaway, and I think we've realized the giveaways don't work. Yeah. But even just having a bunch of leaders that care about your kids, and I would say that's the next thing. Have a team. Okay, so on a Friday night, so these are probably the things I'll be thinking about. An encounter with God, how are we creating space, and that can be. It doesn't matter about your production value. That can happen in any time. Right. The preaching and teaching of the Word of God, be it in a small group environment or the preaching on a Friday night. Some fun, some joy, just some elements of the service that are this is a good time. We just had a laugh. We enjoyed each other's company. Yeah. And some leaders that really just care about your young people. Yeah. Because I went to youth on a Friday night for the first time. As I gave my life to Jesus at 15. I went as a 14-year-old first time. And I thought, holy moly, this place is so weird. Why are they jumping around and lifting their hands and saying, Jesus, we love you, and oh my gosh, you're so good, and shouting. And I was like, this is kind of odd. Yeah. But the people there were just, I'm like, man, I've never met people who genuinely want to take an interest in my life like these people have. Wow. And there was something quite significant about that. So having a group of leaders that are man, we're going to make this a great time for you. We want to get to know you. We want to hear your story. So I'd say those are probably the elements I'd be thinking about on a Friday night. And you can have that at any size. Yeah. You can have an encounter with the presence of God with a handful of people in the living room. You can hear the preaching of the word as you open the Bible and you share with one another, this is what God's been speaking to me, or this is what the Bible says about this. Yeah. You can have a bit of fun by, it doesn't matter if you've got a small group, and you can go and make some lifelong memories with it. Some of the best memories I've ever had have been with 10 of my closest friends, and so, and we're just having amazing, incredible times, but we've got Jesus at the center, and then a group of people who genuinely care about young people. I think that's, for me, those are some of the things that will make a great Friday night.
How good. Merc, you disagree with any of that?
No, I think it's all good.
Yeah, nice.
Anything off the back of that for Fridays?
No, I think that was fantastic. Yeah, nailed it.
Perfect. We'll go.
Here's the prize. That's where we go.
I love as well that you said we realize that giveaways don't work.
Yeah.
Kids aren't gonna stay for hype. They're gonna stay for Jesus.
I've always realized that how you get them is how you'll keep them.
Yeah.
So if you get them for a hoverboard and 15 PS5s on a Friday night, we've really tried stuff like that. Bring all your friends, we'll give you a hoverboard. And the kid never came back the week later. Because they came for the hoverboard. They didn't come for Jesus. They rode away straight to darkness on the hoverboard. That's crazy, isn't it? I shouldn't say that. But I'm like, you redact that one. But I'm like, man, we've got to give them something that the world can't offer. Yeah. And the world can probably offer you something more than a hoverboard, Yeah.
Totally.